It was the design of Angelo Ricci and Joe Zanuck and Manuel Silva to call on the terrible old man. This old man dwells all alone in a very ancient house on Water Street near the sea, and is reputed to be both exceeding rich and exceedingly feeble, which forms a situation very attractive to men of the profession of Messrs. Ricci, Zanuck and Silva, for that profession was nothing less dignified than robbery. The inhabitants of Kingsport say and think many things about the terrible old man, which generally keep him safe from the attention of the gentlemen like Mr. Ricci and his colleagues, despite the almost certain fact that he hides a fortune indefinite magnitude somewhere about his musty and venerable abode. He is, in truth, a very strange person, believed to have been a captain of East India clipper ships in his days. So, all that no one can remember when he was young, and so taciturn that few knows his real name. Among the gnarled trees in the front yard of his aged and neglected place he maintains a strange collection of large stones, or he grouped and painted so that it resembled the idols in some obscure eastern temple. This collection frightens away most of the small boys who love to taunt the terrible old man about his long white hair and beard, or to break the small painted window of his dwelling with quick missiles. But there are other things which frighten the older and more curious folk who sometimes steal up to the house to peer through the dusty panes. These folk say that on a table in a bare room on the ground floor are many peculiar bottles, in each small piece lit of suspended pendulum wise from its string, and they say that the terrible old man talks to these bottles, addressing them by such names as Jack, Scarface, Long Tom, Spanish Joe, Peters, and Mate Ellis, and that whenever he speaks to the bottle the little lead pendulum makes certain definitive vibration as if in answer. Those who have watched the tall, lean, terrible old man in these peculiar conversations do not watch him again. But Angelo Ricci and Joe Zanuck and Manuel Silva were not of Kingsport blood. They were of that new and heterogeneous alien stock which lies outside the charmed circle of the New England life and traditions, and they saw in the terrible old man merely a tottering, almost helpless grey beard who could not walk without the aid of his not cane, and whose thin, weak hand shook pitifully. They were really quite sorry in their way for the lonely, unpopular old fellow, whom everybody shunned, and at whom all the dogs barked singularly. But business is business, and to a rover who souls in his professions, there is a lure and a challenge about the very old and very feeble man who has not accounted to bank, and who pays for his used necessities at the village store with Spanish gold and silver minted 2 centuries ago. Mr. Ricci, Zanuck, and Silva selected the night of April 11th for the call. Mr. Ricci and Mr. Silva were to interview the poor old gentleman, whilst Mr. Zanuck waited for them under a presumable metallic burden with a covered motor car in Ship Street, by the gate in the tall rear wall of their host ground. Desired to avoid needless explanation in case of unexpected police intrusion, prompt is planned for a quiet and an instantaneous departure. As prearranged, the 3 adventurers started out separately in order to prevent any evil-minded suspicious afterward. Mr. Ricci and Silva met in Water Street, by the old man's front gate, and although they did not like the way the moon shone down upon the painted stones throughout the budding branches of the Northnies, they had more important things to think about than mere idle superstition. They feared it might be unpleasant work making the terrible old man location concerning his hoarded gold and silver. For age, sea captains are notably stubborn and perverse. Still, he was very old and very feeble, and there were 2 visitors. Mrs. Ricci and Silva were experienced the art of making unwilling persons vulnerable, and the screams of a weak and exceptionally venerable man can be easily muffled. So they moved up to the one lighted window and heard the terrible old man talking childishly to his bottles with the pendulums. Then they donned the mask and knocked politely at weather-stained oaken door. Waiting seemed very long to Mr. Zanuck as he fidgeted restlessly in the covered motor car by the terrible old man's back gate in Ship Street. He was more than ordinary tender-hearted, and he did not like the high-pitched scream he had heard in the ancient house just after the hour appointed for the deed. Had he not told his colleagues to be as gentle as possible with the pathetic old sea captain? Very nervously, he watched that narrow oaken gate in the high and ivy-clad stone wall.